Welcome to the Turtle Shell Therapy Institute, a podcast made to help you learn how to feel more comfortable inside and outside of your shell. Hello and welcome. I'm your host, James Nee Hunley, licensed clinical social worker practicing in Denver, Colorado. So after listening to the last episode, I realized as I was going through my background and what I'm currently doing, I completely spaced and forgot to mention that I am also an adjunct instructor at the University of Denver in their graduate school of social work, which I've been doing that for a couple years now, and I really enjoy it. I find that being a teacher helps me not only learn better, but it just really helps my practice naturally, because I am trying to learn and stay current so that I can make sure that I'm giving my students all of the most up-to-date research and most current information. It's one of these, mental health is like a lot of fields, but it is also a social science. It's a science, so it does change, it does evolve. So we're always finding new information about mental health, about emotion, attachment, trauma, how it all impacts the brain development. So I teach a few classes there. I teach an intro to research class there. I also teach a class specifically in cognitive theory. I also do the field instruction. So all social workers have to go through a field placement, which is basically an internship. And for my role specifically, not every placement may have a master's level social worker available. And the reason it's important there's a master's level social worker is we want to make sure our students are getting the social work perspective. So like I said in the last episode, social work is pretty broad, but we have a code of ethics. We have 6 core values. We do have our own degree. So there is social work as a theory and practice all on its own. It all revolves around social justice and making sure that we're acting ethically and not causing harm, but that we are causing or helping impact and empower positive change to happen. Either for the individual, at the community level, the societal level, and so on. So if that's not available, I have the opportunity to provide that for students, which it's just been really cool because, again, then I get to see all these different sides of social work, and it just helps me develop as well. So today's episode is going to be all about emotions. What are they? Why do we have them? How are they trying to help us? That's important. A lot of people don't like emotions, and I get it. I don't like mine all the time either. They don't always look at things. A lot of times their perspective can be skewed. Now, they're not always wrong though. Sometimes our emotions are very perceptive. Regardless though, what I tell my clients a lot is that we can think of emotions as the check engine light in our car. It's just a signal to let us know, hey, there's something going on and you're going to want to look at it because it might be serious. Now, when we're driving and we see the check engine light, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to pull over or get to the mechanic right away. We don't need to panic or necessarily think that, oh my gosh, there's something really bad happening here. It is important, though, that we do take note, and if we have time, we do check it out, see what's going on under the hood, or go to a professional just to check in on it to make sure that everything's okay. Now, that doesn't have to happen right in the moment if you don't have time, but just definitely take note and don't ignore it, because if you just ignore it, it may be serious and you'll eventually break down at some point. So that's just one way to think about emotions. It's just a signal to let you know that there might be something going on and it might be serious. Most emotion science today is influenced by the Ekman's Atlas of Emotions. So the Ekmans are this father-daughter duo in psychology, and this research is completely funded by the Dalai Lama. And what they did was they looked at all these different cultures, all these different societies, and interviewed them, got to know their culture around emotions. What language they have for different emotions, the different words. And they found that in most cultures and societies, there are definitely different words and maybe different emotions, but they all whittle down to these 5 basic emotions. And there's a spectrum, right? That's a thing that we run into a lot in our society. we've been raised for generations to think of things in more of a binary and either or, when really it's more of a spectrum. And a lot of things are fluid as well. But if we can think of emotions more of a spectrum, so like, for example, for anger, some would say on one end of the spectrum, there's rage. And then on the other end of the spectrum, they would say maybe there's even apathy. Now, apathy would be on the opposite end of rage, because you're upset with something, you're angry about something, but it's just to the point where you're apathetic. You just can't care about it. That's just one example. Apathy can also have a lot, you may just genuinely just not care about it too. I want to acknowledge that. But just as an example, that can be an example of the spectrum of anger. Again, there's a lot of different conversations going on about emotions, because there's also our different experiences with the emotions and our interpretations of the emotions, what we associate with them. Some people may not associate anger and apathy, but other people might. Anyway, it's a growing science, and it's complex. We're learning a lot. But this is a good place if you're trying to learn more about emotions and trying to understand them. The Atlas of Emotions, it has a website, just you can Google it or look it up. And it walks you through the 5 basic emotions that come up in every society and culture. So, enjoyment. What the website says, enjoyment describes the many good feelings that arise from experiences both novel and familiar. Then we have anger, which I was just talking about. We get angry when something blocks us or when we think we're being treated unfairly. Fear or anxiety, a lot of us will talk about it, which anxiety actually is an umbrella term for several different emotions, but we have it associated most with fear. So we'll just go with that right now. Our fear of danger lets us anticipate threats to our safety. Sadness. Now, I think for a lot of people, sadness is actually really uncomfortable. And a lot of us, I don't think, really know how to work through sadness. We get scared that we're going to get stuck in it a lot of the time. Or as one of my clients said, that they feel like they really know how to wallow in sadness, but they're not totally sure if they know how to work through it or process it to get through the sadness. Sadness is a response to loss, and feeling sad allows us to take a time out and show others that we need support. That's how the Ackermans describe sadness. And the last one, disgust. So the Ackermans describe it as feeling disgusted by what is toxic helps us to avoid being poisoned physically and or socially. So when we think of emotions, we can think down to those 5 basic ones. And then there's a spectrum within those emotions where we might have different words that go with it. So fear, there could be terror, there could be nervousness, there could be hesitation, for example. And a lot of times when I talk about this with people I work with, they note, oh, there's one positive and the rest are all negative. Now, again, that's more about our association with different emotions. It's not that the other 4 are negative. It's that a lot of us don't necessarily know how to take in those emotions because they are powerful. They can be overwhelming too. And I'm not pointing fault at anybody. For generations, a lot of us didn't have good modeling for how to really process and honor these emotions so that we can avoid them completely overwhelming us or taking completely over. So, like I said, acknowledging that's a big part of these emotions, acknowledging they're there. Like the car, the check engine light signal in the car. Okay, I'm angry, or I'm sad, or I'm scared, I'm disgusted. What is happening here? And notice in the language too, when I was reading through that, a lot of it was, with anger, it feels unfair. So a lot of it is about how are we perceiving the environment. And that's all based on our attachment styles, our different experiences, was there trauma involved? Our emotions are trying to protect us. So if there's a perception that something unfair is happening to me, it makes sense that anger would come up to try and get you to advocate for yourself. If there is something that feels like it's going to potentially harm me physically or emotionally, it makes sense that fear would come up to just check out the situation. But it's up to us then to slow down and look and make sure, is this actually happening? So much easier said than done. And the reason for that, when these emotions come up, when they feel really powerful and, you're starting to see things a little bit more, maybe narrowly or subjectively, we'll just use like fear as a good example. I'm perceiving something to be dangerous to me. Either a person's making me feel unsafe emotionally or maybe even physically. We don't want to ignore that. That is a biological response just to make sure to check things out. Something's not feeling safe. So I will just sit here. I will slow down and kind of assess the situation. Now, that's not exactly what happens because there's a lot of research showing that neurologically or biologically, we're still catching up to our society. Now, it would make sense back when we were tribal and we weren't in modern society, that if something felt like a threat to our safety, especially back then, it usually was. So we would want to be cautious and we would want to make sure that we could react quickly. So what happens in modern day society when that process gets elicited in us, when we start to feel scared and we start to fear something may be a threat to us, our logical brain, or otherwise known as our prefrontal cortex, it actually shuts down. The blood starts to drain from that and it starts to go more into the limbic system, or the emotion, the part of the brain where the emotions live, the emotional brain. And then if we get really scared, we can go into our amygdala, which I'm going to talk more about in our next episode. But the amygdala is the survival part of the brain. That's where the fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response all live. Again, I'll get more into that all next episode. But it would make sense that if a tiger was chasing us, or a person from another tribe or culture, if they were going to attack us, it would make sense for us to need to react quickly. And we do have some instances in our modern society where we do just need to react quickly, but not as many as we did before. And so that's what happens. Our logical brain starts to shut down and it activates our emotional brain and starts to activate our survival brain. And that's why they can feel so overwhelming and we can misread situations. We're trying to protect ourselves. And our brain hasn't quite caught up to be able to assess all of the situations accurately. However, that's the really cool thing about therapy. The brain can change. And that's what the awareness does. So a big part of therapy, too, that I forgot to mention in the last episode is, there's the awareness building piece. That's part of the therapy, building the awareness. But then a lot of times the people I work with talk about how, I have all this awareness, but now I don't know what to do with it. Nothing's changing. And part of that is because this process happens really fast. It isn't like our logical brain is like, oh, should I shut down or not? It just does it. So this is where therapy, and why I keep emphasizing slowing down, can be really helpful. We build that awareness and then we keep it in our mind so that we can try something different, slow down and try something different. That's why a lot of these mindfulness techniques come up a lot in therapy. Take a deep breath. If you can, try to move yourself from the situation, or see if you ask the other person, can I have a moment just to think through this, or whatever you need to say. And the breath is helpful because when this process starts, logical brain shuts down, emotion brain and survival brain start to turn on. Adrenaline starts to get pumped into our bloodstream. Our heart rate starts to increase. Adrenaline starts to go in our veins. That's why we start to feel tense, because we're getting ready to possibly have to maybe fight or run away or freeze, go rigid, or try to find someone or something that will make us feel safe, or try to appease the person that is trying to that the person that is stressing us out or the thing that is stressing us out. Again, I'll get more in depth into that next episode. But all of that is happening. And the only thing that you can really control during that process is your breath, because your breath will start to get shallower if you slow down and notice. So taking a deep breath can help. It'll start to get more oxygen into your brain too, and it starts to signal to your brain, okay, maybe there isn't a threat happening. Doing that along with some encouraging self-talk. Try not to shame yourself, because shame, it's uniquely human. I'll get into that in a little bit, but shame is uniquely human, and it keeps us stuck in this process. There's more and more research that shows that. Compassion is what actually helps us. So, okay, I'm feeling scared right now, so I'm acknowledging and showing compassion. That's okay. I just need to assess the situation, because there's probably something happening related to your attachment history or trauma history that's feeling familiar right now. And that's what's eliciting these really strong emotions. So just slowing down, giving yourself compassion, that'll help slow your heart rate, relaxing your muscles, and that'll help you get your logical brain back on so that you can think a little more clearly. And what I want to acknowledge too is sometimes there actually is a real threat happening. But in today's modern society, especially in like the workplace, for example, having a reaction, a fight, flight, freeze response doesn't always really help in these modern day stressors like it used to back in the day, where our brain is still operating from. Again, with practicing it in the moment, being aware of it, talking about it with a therapist, trusted people that are encouraging and can create safety for you, that will create new neural pathways in the brain so that it doesn't go into that process so quickly. So let me get back to shame. Now, I have a dog and I have 2 cats. And so when I first heard the idea that shame is uniquely human, I was like, well, no, I've seen my dog feel ashamed before. And what the people who research this say to that is dogs can feel guilt, they can feel sad, they can feel full, those full range of emotions that humans feel, but shame is uniquely human. It's a result of our prefrontal cortex and our ability to reflect and to think farther into the future than other mammals. Now, my dog can definitely plan a little bit into the future. I have seen her definitely try to, keep an eye on me, and you can tell she formulates a little heist to try and get any food that I might leave on the coffee table unattended. I definitely can see that, but she's not thinking so far like we do. Like, we come up with 5-year plans. We see ourselves distant to the future. My dog isn't really thinking about what her golden years are going to look like or about the afterlife, these deeper things that we think about. She also doesn't think as far back into the past and analyze it like we do. When she does think, she does have memories. She can remember the past, so that's part of the training. She knows she's not supposed to take the food unattended, so that's why she needs to be sneaky about it if she's going to do it, because she knows that I will get upset and she will be in trouble. But she's not ashamed. She feels guilty, and she maybe feels scared that I'm not going to get over it, or she feels sad that I'm upset with her. But that also passes pretty quickly once I start petting her, and that she feels happy and feels okay again. But she doesn't walk around thinking I'm a bad girl. That is uniquely human. We will look at our past actions or even judge our own thoughts and make this conclusion that we are bad, that we are not good people because we are having these thoughts, or because we made these decisions in the past, or we're thinking about making these future decisions. We will get anxious and scared that, we will think of all these different scenarios and all these possibilities of what could happen in the future. So let's talk a little bit more about shame. So you might have noticed as I'm talking about shame, I'm not calling it bad or maladaptive or anything like that. I'm calling it uniquely human. That's because I don't think any emotions are bad. And I think that's what also keeps us stuck in a lot of emotions when we're judging them. And it isn't necessarily, if we feed into it, then it gives us this feeling that we are inherently wrong or there's something bad about us. And that's where it becomes a little bit more problematic. But shame, I would say the function of that is to make it similar to guilt. It's to try to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable and that we can learn from the situation and try and change. However, that doesn't always happen if we're just continually shaming ourselves over something. To counter that, that's where the compassion comes in. So when I'm saying compassion, I'm not talking about making excuses for yourself or, enabling the behavior or trying to like discount or not acknowledge any accountability that you might have in the situation. When I say compassion, I mean bringing in some understanding that, yeah, this happened. You may have made these decisions. You may have had these choices. And there's another reason other than you're a bad person that does bad things. A lot of times people make these decisions out of survival or what was modeled for them on how to think about certain situations or perceive or how to respond or react to certain situations. Again, that's where this building self-awareness can help us to develop the ability to change how we respond to situations or how we perceive them or think about them. That's what compassion does. So, for example, me being really angry that somebody disrespected me, that's valid. That's okay. I'm allowed to be angry about it. When it starts to become a problem is if I act out on it, yelling at the person or anything like that. Now, I may have the desire to do that. I may even play out a scenario in my head about doing that, just yelling at the person or being really aggressive. And if I slow down and reflect on what is that about, there could be a lot of different reasons. So just with the example, maybe it's because I've been feeling disrespected in a lot of different places in my life, or feeling like I'm starting to shame myself and feel like I'm not worthy of respect. And then that elicits the anger in this one situation. Do you see how powerful that information can be? Because then I can reflect on that. Where else am I feeling disrespected? Is that actually what's happening? Or is it specific to maybe one area or how I feel about myself? What can I change anything about that? If I'm feeling disrespected by another person or somewhere else in another area of my life, can I do something to change that? If it's about how I feel about myself, getting curious about that. Why am I feeling unworthy of respect? Where is that coming from? And then looking at what do I have control over? What do I not have control over? And, as the saying goes, then we focus on what we can control. But again, too, it also says accepting what we can't control. There's an acceptance piece. And I think in the society, we see acceptance too much as just dismissing, just get over it, just move on. But part of getting to accept, it's really the only way to get to acceptance usually is going through a grieving process. A lot of times it's really upsetting, the things that we don't have control over. We feel like we really, why not? And that can be really upsetting. Now, when I'm talking about that, I'm thinking of that on multiple different levels. There's things in our society that we just don't have control over. And that's sad because, we probably should. Maybe we could, depending on what we're talking about. It's still helpful and necessary to grieve that we don't have control over some of these things in our society. And that's important so that we can put our energy towards what we do have control over so that we can make the change that we want to see in our society, in ourselves, in our family systems, if possible. So when I talk about family and friends, that's where the boundaries piece starts to come in. You can't always control what other people are going to do, and same with coworkers or just even just anybody you run into in this world and in this life. We can't always control what they're going to do, but we can control our response and we can control our boundaries. Now, a lot of people, when they think about boundaries, they, one, don't always think about emotions. And two, that's another thing that has a negative association in our lives. I saw this meme once and it's just always stuck with me. And I even share it with my clients that I work with. And it goes, empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. So just take that in a little bit. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. Now that goes along with another meme that I share with my clients that I've seen that I think also goes well with this. Boundaries are not saying I don't want you in my life. Boundaries are me saying this is what I need to have you in my life. Or something to that effect. But basically what it's saying is boundaries aren't saying that I don't want to be in relationship with you. It doesn't mean I'm trying to cut you out. Sometimes it can. We can talk more about that too. But usually that comes in when the person has continuously not honored the boundaries and broken them down. And that becomes a natural consequence for the person to be able to protect their own mental wellness. But a lot of times what boundaries are I want to keep this relationship with you and this is what I need so that I can stay safe in the relationship. We both can, both still enjoy this relationship. We can keep it positive or neutral. That's what boundaries are actually doing. That's what I'm saying when I'm holding boundaries, but it doesn't always feel that way. For a lot of people, boundaries can feel like they're being attacked or persecuted. And again, coming back to emotions, it can shade how we're perceiving what's happening. That's why it's important for us to slow down. This person setting a boundary with me, are they actually being unreasonable or mean? Or is it possible that maybe there is something that I did or something that's happened? Or maybe it's just what they need. It's just what they're needing for their own healing and journey. And it's not even personal against you. You can see how compassion can open us up to other possibilities. Whereas when we stick just with the emotion without sort of not questioning, but sort of just analyzing it, we need to validate it first. This feels upsetting, or whatever the emotion is. Just validate it. And are there other possibilities here? And if you end up being right, which is possible, as I keep saying, absolutely use the emotion. We don't have to necessarily act on it, but being able to sit with it and process it and understand it, that gives you the power to make the decision on how you want to respond in a way that will actually feel good and won't feel reactionary. So to tie this back to the Ekman's research, the Atlas of Emotions, shame would fall under disgust. And often, it's disgust with ourselves. That's where I'm a bad person. That's sort of like, ugh, like you just feel like cringe. You just kind of cringe around it. So shame would fall under that and those 5 basic emotions that we started talking about. So I guess I've sort of gone over a bit how you would sit with it, but let me give you just a concrete strategy. So I call this a mindful moment. It's a practice that I use in the attachment theory journal, the guided journal that I wrote. So the mindful moment, I usually try to do it a few times a day. It is a moment. So just maybe take like a minute or so, just if that. To start, you may need several minutes, but eventually you'll notice as you get to know yourself better and get to understand your emotions and your attachment style and how everything works with you and why, it does get a lot easier and really can just take maybe like a minute or two. So all you do for the mindful moment is just take a deep breath. Like I had said, the breath is really all you can do. Just scan your body. Just notice the tension in your body. Where is it? For me, a lot of times it's my jaws and my shoulders are tense. I'll also notice my thoughts are fairly aggressive or maybe even shame based, like I'm blaming myself. But what I'll do now that I'm slowed down and noticing these things, I'll continue to slow my breath. And that's where I bring in the compassion. Especially if I know what it's coming from. I'll remind myself I know what this is. It's okay. It's a part of my story. It's my emotions and my brain trying to protect me. And then just acknowledge and then figure out how I want to respond. I also do this throughout the day, even when I'm not feeling distressed, because it just keeps you in touch with yourself. And then you can even notice too, okay, oh, this is what it feels like when I'm more relaxed. And again, stress isn't bad. Stress is there for a reason, just like all the other emotions. That would fall more under like the fear side of things. Stress is more, it keeps us motivated to do things. But also, we want to check in and be like, is this stress really needed right now? If you are doing that and you don't really have time to be curious and you're not sure what it is, then what you do is you acknowledge that I don't totally know what this is, and it's something I can come back to later. Now, don't be hard on yourself if you forget about it. I've even like put stuff in my phone sometimes if I keep forgetting, but it keeps coming up again because it will come up again, and that's how you'll remember. So that's just like a concrete strategy that you can try practicing this week while you're getting to know your emotions and understand them. And if you don't know what it is and you have time to be curious about it, definitely do that. Be curious. What is this? Some people like to journal. This is a form of, there are meditations out there that can be really helpful. But just being curious and wondering, does this feel familiar? So in EMDR, we do a technique called a float back. And what we'll do is we'll identify the feeling that's coming up from a present experience and just sort of let your mind float back. The body remembers. What is this? What does this remind me of? What does this feel familiar to? So with that, it's a lot to take in today and to think about. We're going to go more in depth with emotions in future episodes as well too. So this won't be the only time I talk about it, but I just wanted to give a general overview, give you guys some strategies, maybe some places to look to continue your own research. Well, I hope to see you back here at the Institute soon. Have a great day and take care.